No, okay. Right, here I am. Where am I? Does that sound better?
Yes.
Right. David and I guess, we had a love put on us right from the early 1950s of going down the bay in the Hayles vessels, over to Stradbroke Island, down and all places, up to Lone Pine, you name it. It's a very, very special thing for us, just to be out there on the water, seeing all these things and experiencing it. And in 1953, we were in Townsville, and we went on the Magnetic and the Minkilla, which were the service boats in those days for Magnetic Island, and they were lovely boats. And I know I went to the Barrier Reef on the Minkilla, and you'll see the picture that I took somewhere in the set of pictures. And as you can imagine, she rolled a lot because of the southeaster, which was always blowing. And you had to be careful where you were seasick, because if you were seasick on the windward side of the ship, you got a refund. Anyway, as I say, it was a love that was put on us. Now, in 1977, I was in Townsville again, and I made sure I met Bob Hayles. He was age 91 at the time. He died the following year. But I guess he's one of the people in my life who's been very kind to me. In his house, he sat me down and he took me through one of his big photo albums, and he told me stories. And I almost wished I'd had a recording machine with me to record all these stories. But, for instance, those of you who knew Bob, he was called ER to his family in most cases to distinguish him from his father, who was also called Bob Hayles. He had a man in Townsville. Townsville was too small a town for these two men. Les Taylor, who also ran a boat company. And on the occasion when Bob got the boat Miranda back from the Navy, which was shockingly badly treated by the Navy, he had to have it surveyed. And who was going to survey it but his old mate, not mate, Les. And Bob was not happy about that at all. So he told me that story. And in particular, the Mirimar and the Mirabel here in Brisbane were army vessels, and they were manned by their original crews, so that they were well looked after, unlike the Navy, who beat the Jesus out of most of the vessels they ever had. And so, for instance, the Tangawima, which he had in Townsville, which was a private yacht, and the Navy had that, and the owner had refused to take it back because it was in such bad condition. So what happened? Well, E.R. Hayles bought it and did it up and made it his private yacht, which was fine. And so he told me all these stories, and he gave me a picture, which is in the book, of the Mirimar and how he wanted it lengthened by 6 feet by Norman Wright. And you'll see that picture in the book that he gave me. And as I say, I was very happy indeed to meet Bob, because he was very kind to me. Anyway, life intervened at this point, and the subject, I went south. I'd already gone south, in fact. The subject sort of stuck in the back of my mind. And then I thought, I'll restart this business of Hayles boats and do a bit of research. And I found that there were lists of the Hayles boats over the period, and that was fine. And I thought, oh well, in view of the distance of these lists, I'm not sure I should bother to go any further. But then I discovered that not a single list, not one, was correct. Even in the E.R. Hayles collection in James Cook University, you will find lots of bits of paper with lists of the fleet, and none have a full list. So I went on, and some of you will know that during the 2000s, I researched this quite a lot, collected photographs, almost did I suppose what you would call a company history of the different Hayles branches in different parts of Northern Australia, and that's the way it goes. Met Valerie Reid in Canberra. She ran the Canberra company, or she had run the Canberra company when I knew her. And so we come down to more modern times when David had planned to do an article on the SS Cooper, the famous excursion steamer here in Brisbane. And I read his draft of this article, and I thought, David's thinking exactly how I think about this sort of thing. And in fact, we could both expand this into a proper book, which we did. And it's here for sale if you haven't already got a copy and you would like one. That was in 2015. And the other thing about David and I is that we write in exactly the same way. We think the same way, we write the same way. And you would not pick at all, even if you looked hard, at what David has contributed to books and what I have contributed to books, whoever we can collaborate with. And so that was that. Then I had a serious health scare, and a friend of mine, a lovely man in Japan, he's an American who was married to a Japanese lady, Wally Higgins is his name, and he's aged 91 this year, and his wife died and he retired to Tokyo. Anyway, he had a copy of the Cooper book, and when he retired, he took it with him to the retirement home. He thought it was such a good book, which is nice. And he said to me at Christmas, "Are you thinking of another book?" And I said to myself, well, no, I haven't been thinking of another book. Then I thought, yes, there is one more book, and this is this book here, the Three Ladies of Moreton Bay, about the Mirimar, the Mirabel, and the Mirana, and their lives. And so, with the work I had already done in the 2000s on the company and the boats, it was fairly easy work, in fact, to work it up with David's assistance, of course. David's very good at that, and so here we are. And this is how the book comes to exist. And what I will do now is to pass you over to David, who will tell you a bit more about everything that's gone on.
Well, thank you very much, Colin, and thank you, Peter, for your introduction. And thank you all for coming here too. We're really very touched by the number of people who are here and by the diversity of backgrounds that are represented in this room. So we are really delighted by your coming. And I should also recognise, although I haven't seen him yet, Brian Martin, who is good on you, Brian. Thank you for that. Brian has taken some of these photos that you see, and they're in the book, from his magnificent collection. So he spent more time down photographing the regular ships on the river, the launches, than I did, and it's much appreciated and more food. So thank you, Brian. Well, as Colin mentioned, he's been working on this book probably for 50 years, thinking over in the back of his mind, and also producing various drafts of fleet lists and ship histories, which have become more and more complete as the years have gone by, until now. I think he's prepared to let it go. And as he mentioned, we were given the challenge of writing this last book for Colin. At Christmas time, I hadn't thought we were writing any books either. But in the meantime, between then and now, we've come up with three Ladies of Moreton Bay, and it's been quite a satisfying and quite enjoyable process that we've gone through. So Colin, my elder brother, and I've always looked up to him and admired him, and I love him very much. He's a man with he's a man with a cheerful and outgoing view of life, and a sense of humour too, high principles, and a man with an inquiring mind too. He's a man of diverse interests, history, arts and music, the travel, and of course in the maritime interests. And he's written, among the books he's written were the Flying Navy, the Fleet Air Arm, and also colonial navies, and he's something of an expert on the colonial navies. But I'm amazed also by the diversity of his writing and by the quality of it. He has written on some pretty obscure topics in his time. The Bellingshausen expedition. So how many of you know about the Bellingshausen expedition to the Antarctic and to Australia and the Pacific? And paddle steamers and the sailing navy in the 19th century. So he's also amazed me too as a survivor in the difficult work of media regulation, which was his career. So he did a full career in that, from retirement in 1966, from his move down to Melbourne in 1966 with the Broadcasting Control Board, and retired on his own terms at the end of that career. It was a difficult world because of the political ping pong which exists with things like media, dealing with the big egos which are in that field, and the number of restructures which amazed me. I was in a time when there weren't a lot of restructures in the Queensland Public Service, but the worst of them was when one of those egos moved the head office of the board from Melbourne to Sydney. And Colin loved Melbourne, he stayed there, and he survived in charge of a very much reduced Melbourne branch office. But we share this interest in shipping, and the Hayles launches and our trips down the bay with Hayles really fostered that interest, because it was from their wharves at just under the shadow of the Victoria Bridge down to Pinkenba was virtually a review of all the shipping that was in port at the time. So you had local shipping, you had interstate, and you had overseas. And they were interesting ships too, with graceful curves, a balanced profile, and many of them had a story of the war. And I think my Maritime Museum friends would endorse those sentiments. So Colin's move to Melbourne actually enhanced that interest, because it broadened it between the Victorian scene and the Queensland scene, and we exchanged information and photographs. But getting back to the three Ladies of Moreton Bay and their companion book, The Lady of the Water, about the Cooper. So we've got a few copies of these available, so if you want any, we've got, they're $25 each, so we would love you to be able to have some. But this, our three Ladies of Moreton Bay, so they're the Mirimar, the Mirabel and the Mirana. They're names which are very well known to older people who knew the Brisbane scene, and there were others, like the Majestic, which ran to Lone Pine, but we've stuck with those three because all three of them were Brisbane built by Northern Lights. They served in Brisbane, and they completed 4 careers in Brisbane and Moreton Bay. The Majestic was actually second hand, and she didn't go out in the bay, so she missed out, although we talk about her in the book, and there's even a picture of her in the book. There's others too, and also those of you who know Hayles, there's the Townsville connection, which was quite active and strong, and Hayles Senior had started the firm with their first ferry 35 years before any of them got to Brisbane. So they were well established in Townsville, and was a complete development program for Magnetic Island, as well as the ferries. There was a hotel there were cottages, there was a jetty, so you could do all of the Magnetic Island experience with Hayles. There was a competitor there too, but he didn't survive nearly as long as the Hayles company did. And the first of the Hayles vessels to come to Brisbane was the Mirimar, and she was a groundbreaker in various respects. She was built to actually expand Hayles' influence into Moreton Bay, and Bob Hayles, and I think this was ER, said he had a vision of popularising the islands of Moreton Bay, and in particular Stradbroke Island, where there were settlements at Amity and at Dunwich, and also there was the hidden jewel of Point Lookout, which was virtually accessible only to those who had boats of their own and had time to get across the island to get there. And so the Miramar started services to Amity and Dunwich, not just passenger services, but also supplying the communities there. And that just expanded, developed Stradbroke Island considerably. And also, Hayles also developed Amity by building a kiosk and dance floor there. And upstream in Mandalay also developed a kiosk and a dance floor for the picnic grounds there, which was serviced by Hayles launches. So over the years, the Hayles launches also stretched to other corners of Moreton Bay, down to Carragara for the tropical fruit cruise, showboats to Tangalooma, to Bribie Island and Redcliffe, and to Lone Pine, and Bishop Island too, towards the end. And they were all very popular in their day. Back in the early days, 1934, when the Miramar began, cars were a rarity. Only the very privileged or those who needed it for their work had motor cars. So a trip out on the bay on the Miramar was quite an attraction, quite popular. And there's one of the photos there where you can see the crowds on the wharf down to crowding the wharf, and the Miramar about to come in to collect a full load and take them out to the bay. There were also other opportunities, and things like St Helena was a later attraction, and where there were special occasions like the Queen arriving on the Britannia in 1963. Colin and I went down aboard her and met the Queen at the mouth of the river. Britannia passed by, we saw the Queen and the Duke in the distance there, and then we followed them up to Newstead So occasions like that were, the Hayles vessels were there to satisfy the needs of the crowds, the onlookers. The Mirimar was also a groundbreaking design. She was the largest timber launch built in Brisbane up at that time, and she had, for the first time, enclosed upper deck seating. And this was followed in other vessels. The Mirana also adopted that design. There were others that followed belonging to Hayles, and even in the 1970s, Red Jansett built two similarly designed vessels to service the Whitsundays. And one of those, the Lady Brisbane, is still active on the river in Brisbane. The Mirabel was also a legend, and she had a continuous life in the capacity to which she was built of 75 years, which is long by any ship standard, and it was only 10 years ago that she was retired, and she was superseded on the run to Lone Pine by Mirimar 2, which was a catamaran. Virtually a demonstration of the changing design of excursion vessels. And Mirimar 2 in 2009 took over from the Mirimar 1 and is still doing that run. The Hayles also was visionary enough to recognise the potential of catamaran ferries, and the fast catamaran ferries took over. He acquired his first one in 1982. So the little Mirabel also lasted for 75 years, also working in the same capacity, though she had different names and different owners and ended up down in New South Wales. So two vessels, the Mirimar and the Mirabel, which both served their masters for 75 years, and quite an achievement. The Mirimar, which came later, also served Hayles up until the 1980s, until the firm was sold, and she was well known too. So the three ladies of Moreton Bay, Mirimar, Mirana and Mirabel, they make an interesting story, and we hope that in reading the book it will bring back happy memories of times that you have shared on the bay or on the river with people who were dear to you. And having challenged Colin to write another book, this is what the Venerable Godfather in Japan said about the finished work. Though I was never able to visit Brisbane, your research and writing make the river, the Bay Islands and the small towns so much more than just places on a map. Those were interesting times, and the Lady of the Water and the three ladies of Moreton Bay bring them to life. It's good to have memories, and I'm sure you have brought good memories to people of our retirement age generation, along with introducing younger people to those days when a weekend or holiday trip was more than just setting out in a family auto and hoping the traffic wouldn't be too bad. So Colin and I have enjoyed writing this book, and we're proud to have been able to tell the story of three ladies of Moreton Bay. And we warmly commend this book to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Colin and David do invite you to have some refreshment, and they will be here signing copies and making copies available of both books at $25 each. Thank you for coming this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.